Okay, this is an introduction to AgForm 3D. We'll go through the basic setups, open new files, different things like that. So if you go up here to the upper left-hand corner, click on the Topcon icon, you have a list of menus here. One would be new. This would be starting a new file, whether you're out in the field surveying or if you're bringing in points from another project, like importing text points, different things like that. So you can click on new and you give it the name you want, go to the file folder. This is where you would choose where you want to store this file. The next thing you have is your geoid file. Not everybody uses geoid files, but the geoid files they're a model of the Earth that surveyors use to, kind of help tie in your survey points to the model of the Earth and kind of give you a little more accurate survey. Here you can name your master benchmark, give it whatever you want. It defaults to BM1. You can call it master benchmark or MB or anything that you want. Give it a description. If you're setting a benchmark on a certain point that you want to come back to, which typically when you set a master benchmark, you want to have it where you can go back to it and not be destroyed, because it may be 6 months or more before you get back to that field or the dirt mover gets to the field. So you can set it on this and describe exactly where it is so that you have a better chance of finding it. Here's your coordinates. These coordinates can be whatever you want. This is just user-defined coordinates. I typically use 0, 0, 10. Some people use 0, 0, 100. Some of the government agencies use 5,000, 5,100, just whatever you want it to be. You can do it here. Or if you have state plane coordinates of the known point, you can key them in right here. And so you just click OK. We're going to cancel this. And here, next we have, under this list, we have the last 10 projects that were open that you can choose from just quickly without having to go search through them through the open command. Here in the open command, we have open project, which means you go to anywhere you got a file stored, then you can choose it. And then we have import points, which is importing points from a text file. This could be from drone data, LiDAR data, elevations taken by precision ag system, from a farmer. You can bring in those points. There's a way you have to convert those to do that, and we'll go through that sometime later. Or you can import a tin model as a topographic surface, and I have a file for that we'll get into later. Next, we have save and save as. As most of you probably know, save, you just click save, it'll save it under the current name that you have it. And then, but if you want to give it a different name, just to distinguish it from whatever you're originally working with, whether it's another revision of a design or whatever, you can do a save as, and then you actually give it the name that you want to, and then it differentiates it from what you've been working on. Then we have print, print to active view, print preview, which will give you a preview of what it's going to look like when it's printed out. And then we have print setup. And under print setup, you have this here. You can type in your name of your company or whatever you want. Put comments in here to let dirt movers know what they need to do as far as things in the field, whether it's a tail ditch or a road, how high it's going to be, how wide, things like that. You can change the text size. This text size will be for the box around at the bottom where the comments are, and also for things up on the screen like the scale bar and other items. Then you can do two things. You have the current view, which will be what you see on the screen, or you can do full. So if you have a cut field grid turned on and in the full view it's too crowded together, you can zoom in and make the text readable. If you hit full, it's going to print at that scale on multiple pages. So it'd be something you can just kind of fool with, and if you ever need to use something like that. But it'll be multiple pages that you could tape together, or whatever you need to do. So next we have the help section, which we have the manual, which is the manual to give you instructions for everything in here that you may or may not read. It's a good reference. Activate the product, deactivate the product, and then about AgForm. And about AgForm, this will give you the version that you're currently using and the date. It has your device identification number, it has your serial number, and your activated version. This device ID is for the computer that you're using at that time, and you will need to have this whenever you go to upgrade your AgForm to a new version. So here I'm running 14.0.1, and in this case it's P1, and here's tells you what's enabled: AgForm 3D, yes. This is the expiration date, and then smooth contours, yes, and the expiration date. So I'm going to go ahead and open a field. We'll just choose one that I've already got set up. And we've got this one is one that I did recently. And in here, we've got the master benchmark and a secondary benchmark, and then secondary benchmarks down in here, and the existing elevation contours. Also in this, let me turn these benchmarks off. You can zoom in. Here we have break lines, which you can use these for two reasons. One, break line if you're doing like a ditch and you want all the triangulation to follow that line and not skip across the ditch. You can use that for that. Then also, this is a pipeline, two pipelines going across here that I marked. So I wanted the elevations to be used, but I also wanted to differentiate them from just normal interior points. So I used it to identify those sometimes. Over here, we have a landmark line, landmark points and a line. You can connect these together, and that's part of something you would do in your survey system. So if we go up here, home, we have some menus that are available to us and some that aren't. And once we start designing, then these other menus will open up. So you have the first one you're going to start with is your design. So you're going to if you click on design here, it's going to ask you, do you want to begin with section design? And you say yes. It immediately creates a boundary, a perimeter line around here, a section, basically a section line. And then it comes up with a best fit plane of design. So then you can choose what you want to do. Next, you have other selections that you can choose from. Then we have delete all. So if you hit delete, it just deletes every section that you've got and goes back to the existing state before you ever started. And then you have section properties. If we go back, Control Z, you have section properties. This is where you can give the section a name other than just section 1 if you wanted to, and you can also do a description. And there's other things you can select in there too. Then we have the report, which is your design report, which we don't have a design or anything, but this is where you'd see your area, your cut volume, cut fill ratio, max cut, max fill, volume per acre, import, export. And if you have this listed, you can do your cost per volume, cost per acre, total costs, and then your slope 1, slope 2. And you can get rid of some of these things if you don't want them. You can go to the setup menu and choose things. Like if you don't want the cost volume, you can remove it. Cost area, remove. Total cost, remove. Things like that. Then just click OK. And there you have it, shortened this. So click OK on that. Also under here we have a profile view, which lets you look at a part of the field from a profile angle. So this is the ditch, and you can exaggerate it or de-exaggerate it, and you can move it. If you can move it two ways. You can grab it in the middle and move it up or down, or you can grab one end or the other and move it like that. So you have some options here on how to view it. Next, we have the existing 3D, which is, and you can twist it around, take your left click and hold it and move it around, and you can zoom in and out and everything. You can use your, if you right click, you can center your view a certain place. So if you want to center your view here, right click on the ditch and it moves it. Then you can zoom in and kind of look at it from a different angle. Close that out. So then if we have a design, you can do a design 3D. And then we have the options menu, which is where we do a lot of the setup, and we'll get in through some of that. So here you have your contour interval, which defaults to 2/10. And also this datum, if you want the contour lines to start at a particular elevation, you can type in that elevation here, whatever you got. So if we go back over here, here's our lines, which there's 10, 960, and different colors and everything. So if you wanted your contour lines to start at an 820, you can go back in here, change this to 8.20, click OK. So we find this is where they would start from, if you're trying to find a particular contour. It's useful sometimes. Most time, just leave it as is. This include benchmarks in the 10 model. Typically I leave this unchecked, but if you want the benchmarks in your 10 model, which creates these contours, you can click on this checkbox here and activate it. One thing that you may run into, like if you have your master benchmark or a secondary benchmark is on, say, a well that's in the middle of the field. If this is turned on, it's going to triangulate to that benchmark on that well, which may be a foot above the ground. So it kind of gives you a false set of contours in that area. Your contour interval for your cuts and fills, typically they're on 0.2. I had them on 0.1 because of another project I was working on. You can do a 3-color or a gradient. It defaults to 3-color. Then down here you have your contour interval, which is your contour, your survey grid interval, which you can change this to whatever you want. You can change the orientation. They default to true north, south, east, and west. And then here's the origin of the grid lines. So we'll get into that. And here, design view, you have your text size, which is the text you see on the screen. This is not the text that's around the bottom of the printed sheet. This controls just what's on the screen. Precision of text, like your numbers would be, if you wanted three numbers after the decimal point, you can change it to 3. Typically 2 is all we use. Precision, slope precision for variable slope surface. You can change this to whatever you want to. Line work color for beam maps, you got black, which that can be changed to whatever you want. And allow use of lower resolution and beam map images. So depending on the image that you see behind it, you can change this, or you can choose just a higher quality map. And this is your transparency of zoom and pan commands, which are these areas over here and these over here, and transparency of section commands. The GPS, this is going to be set up by whoever you got your equipment from. We won't go into this too much, but you can change things in here if you're out in the field. Your base station, there again, it'll be set up whoever you got your equipment from. The base station averaging time is defaults to 30 seconds. And what this is, when you turn your base station on, it's going to average, once it gets a position, it's going to average for 30 seconds before it starts putting out a correction to the rover. And so if you want this to average longer, you can just change this to 60 seconds or 120 or whatever, how long you want it to average before it starts doing that. It'll give you a little more precise position, but you got to remember it's an autonomous position, so it's not truly sub-centimeter accurate. These are multi-path reduction settings that you talk to whoever sets you up, whether you want these checked or not, if they need to be checked. Perform base proximity check. If you're within 33 feet, 10 meters or 33 feet of where the base station was set up before, it will come back on and your rover will give you a green bar. But if you're not in the exact same spot, then you're going to be off by that amount. So it's a little misleading. Survey, number of measurements for a benchmark survey. I think they default to 10 maybe. I set mine for 30. During the testing, whenever we were developing this program, we found that once it got past 30 seconds, especially with the older receivers, and it really it does better with the newer receivers now. Once you got past 30 seconds, the number didn't change that much as far as what it gave you for a benchmark. So the RMS factors are just this. The only time you use this is when you're doing your benchmark. So you can, this is just the defaults that came in it. This computer has never been hooked to GPS, but you can set it to where, I used to set mine, or mine is set to like I think a 0.1 for the horizontal RMS. On the vertical RMS, maybe probably a 0.1 also. And then the PDOP, I think maybe set to either 2 or 3, I can't remember. So no matter what you set these at, if your horizontal, vertical, or PDOP values get over whatever these numbers are in these boxes, your benchmark will stop averaging, and it'll wait for better numbers before it starts averaging again. Even though you got it set for 30 seconds, it may go past 30 seconds or take longer than 30 seconds because these values haven't been met. Elevation filtering is perform averaging when stationary. If you click this, and while you're driving around, your elevation is moving up and down because your receiver is moving. But if you stop, then it will start performing an averaging function, and it will average the elevation of wherever you're sitting. Once you start moving, it resets that number, and until you stop again, then it'll start averaging again. This elevation filter by weighting current epoch, set at 90%. I used to use this, but I don't use it anymore because it does good in fairly flat ground. What it does, based on how you've got this set, the higher the number, the more weighting. As you're surveying, before it gives you the current reading of your position, it looks backwards so far in time and points based on the slider bar. The higher the number, the further back it looks. So it does kind of like an elevation smoothing before it gives you that next point, which is good in fairly flat ground. But I found that when I did this in some real rolling terrain, I went back sometime later and I saw I had some pretty good elevation errors. And I think it was because of this, using this elevation weighting, it was trying to average but I had some 10 and 12 foot elevation differences, so I stopped using it. This is where you put in your geoid file, and if you don't have those, you can talk to me or whoever you got your equipment from, see if you want to use them or not. The S contours, these are just smooth contours. It's something we'll get into. And then here's where you set your units. You can set for US survey feet, metric or international feet. Your directions are decimal degrees, what I use because they're easier to add and subtract. Your slopes are percentages, which is what we've always done in any type of earth movement, is percentage of slope. Your coordinates are northeast elevation, which is, your coordinates down here, northeast, eastings, and elevations. You can change that to, east-north elevation, which would make this E, then N. Or you can change it to X, Y, Z, which basically east-north elevation and X, Y, Z are the same. If you came from, another survey and design system such as Multiplane or Trimble, they use X, Y, Z. Most surveyors use northern and eastern elevations. So that's, your options menu. Then here, whenever you're out in the field survey, and this is your survey mode, where you get into your, rover configuration and receivers and antenna height, things like that, mask angle, and everything. So here in the view, we have a status bar. You can turn on and off, zoom and pan, selection, which is down here. Your field tab, which is over here. Design, we don't have a design, so there's no pane or anything. Auxiliary surface is for like when you cutting a ditch or building a road or something like that. Then your layers, which is over here. Then you have your Bing maps, so you can turn on the Bing maps, and there's a background view of the area. Also, we have icons up here. I'll show you how to get into those. But we can turn it on and off here. Your background map, you can use black or you can use white. Your theme is going to be what the colors are around here, and also minimize ribbon. What this does, see how this doesn't go away now, but if I click on minimize ribbon again, it goes away and only comes back up whenever you click on something. So if we turn this on, it stays here all the time, even if you click off of the bar and onto the screen. So in the field, we have the list of benchmarks, which you have the master benchmark is number 1, and then 2, 3 through 7. It gives your northern, eastern, and elevation. You click on edit. Here's the description of where it's located, the coordinates of the master benchmark, the latitude and longitude, and just the ellipsoidal height, geo and undulation, and MSL height, which there again, these are not totally accurate because it's just an autonomous position. But when you go out to the field and you want to set up on some of these benchmarks, you got to have one that you can put your blade. If you're tying in with your tractor and scraper, you need one on the ground. So let's just say like benchmark number 3, you can set it as master, and they'll ask you to set as master, and you click yes. Now it becomes the master benchmark, and so that's where you would go to tie into this field, and then go around and check yourself on some of the others. And here we have a list of all the interior points, all the way down through the break lines, which are over here and over here, and even on down into the landmark points. And you can edit any of these that you want to. And just like if you choose something over here, like number 2, we go back to the list and highlights in here. Or if you choose 3, 4, and 5, they also highlight out here too. But you can also change whatever you want. If you want to change the elevation, double click on it and then change it. You can also change the description to whatever you want. So you have a way to edit these points. You have add points. You can add a point to the field. Just, you can make it a landmark point or start a landmark line. You can extend a landmark line. You can close a landmark line. So here you would create a point by adding in the northing, easting, and elevation and description if you want to. Typically, whenever we add points, they are usually landmark points. So this way, if you add in the numbers and then click add, it puts it on the field. Now the other one is the add tool. Then you come out here somewhere and find a point, and you want to find the elevation. If you want the elevation out here, go down to the bottom, look at your elevation, and then click on it. It gives you the northern and eastern elevation, but it doesn't give you the elevation of where you click, so you have to add that in separately. So if you wanted it from wherever you click, that's what you'd add in. Or if you wanted at a different elevation, then you can just add it in here and add a description. And you can rotate the field if you want to. Typically, I don't do that very often, but you can just rotate it by a certain amount by just keying in a number here. Auxiliary surfaces are for building pads or ditches, which they still got a little more work to do on that because it's not totally, it doesn't totally show up the yardages and on your tractor machine. Balance zones, these are good for calculating your dirt, how you're going to balance out. If you're working in an area somewhere, and if everything works out within inside the area that's chosen, then chances are you set up pretty good. And then if you see that it's not, if you're working in an area and you move on past that line with dirt, that means you're probably set up too low. Or if you don't make it across the line, then you're probably set up too high. So it gives you a chance to change it. As contours, we can change these to smooth contours for export to other types of programs. You have your tools, you have, distance area, this is for measuring, and also doing if you do just a one click and then move it, you'll notice that it gives you the length, the azimuth reading, and also the existing slope. So from point A to point B right now, there's a downhill slope of a negative 0.05%, half tenth fall per 100 feet. Once you click, that goes away, and now it's giving you the existing slope from this point down to the next one. And you've got a different azimuth. And if you notice that the length is 479.57 feet, but in parentheses, it has 1452. So the first number is the length from the second point to the third point. The one in parentheses is the overall length from here to here down to here. You can inverse, this is where you can measure between 2 points. Let's say like, number 2 and 3 here. We go 2, 3, and then we choose landmarks. And landmarks, hit calculate. It tells you the horizontal distance is 43 feet, highlights it in red, and gives you the azimuth reading and the percentage of slope. So you can do that between different points, and you have interior, perimeter, break lines, landmarks, section lines, benchmarks. Any point that's pretty much created in here, you can calculate that. This volume calculation is another tool to help balance out your dirt. We'll get into that in another section. You can shift your origin, like if we turn on the grid lines, we select the location. Let's just say we want to put it right in the center of this. It moves that. And let's say that we want to split this field parallel to this side over here. So what we would do, we'd do distance area, and we can go from here down to here, and we've got 210.2, we'll just round off 210. So we come back into our options menu for field, and so it's not so crowded, we can change this to 3000, and we do 210 degrees, and click OK. So now this line here is parallel to this. So whenever you get ready to put in a section line, you can just draw a section line, start up here, and go down here, and you've got a reference to go by. So you can also change it to the master benchmark. So if I click this, it would shift back up to the master benchmark that's north of here. And if you had your GPS turned on, you could just click on GPS, and wherever you're sitting, whether in this field or outside the field, it'll click to that. This is water flow accumulation. Some of you may use it, you may not. I rarely use it, but it's there for you to look at. Exchange. This is where we would import field data. We'd import benchmarks from another field to use with this field. You have your import points. You can see they're grayed out right now because we have a section. So if we didn't have this section, if I just hit go back to home, delete all. Now if we go to Exchange, we can import benchmarks, we can import points, we can export field data, benchmarks, points, topo surface, a grid, and that if you put your cursor there, it'll give you a description. You can export a grid of a topographic surface to a text file. And this grid is based on what you have set up in here. So if you wanted to do it on a 25-foot grid, we just change this to 25, and most likely we'd change this back to 0. And so we can do 25. So that's your grid. But we're going to turn the grid lines off. So the existing elevations, it'd be this. So that's what we get exported out. But you can see that only, it stops. It doesn't go all the way to the perimeter. So if you want it tighter to the perimeter, you'd change this grid to 5 feet or 10 feet, something like that. Polylines, if we could export the perimeter line, the break lines, the landmark lines, and also the smooth contours, which would go into an LN3 file, which is another Topcon program, a construction program that you can use, and then you could convert them to something else if you had the programs to do that. Current section, we can export, they're all grayed out because we don't have any sections, but you have to a new project. Let's just say that you have this split into 2 or 3 sections. You would highlight the section that you want to export, just click current section, just click on new project, and it would export just that. If we had this split in half, if we wanted to export just this one to a field all to itself, we just click new project and give it a name. Plane, that goes. This is for use in a Topcon construction program. Also for the 10 model, export the current section as a 10. It'll export the design as a 10. Whereas over here, if we clicked on topo surface, it exports the existing surface as a 10. So in here, we have the design surface. And then here, if you have a variable slope design grid, we can export that as a text file. There again, you have to have on the design grid have turned on. You can export it to local coordinates or geographic. Same thing here, variable slope cut fill grid. And there's times that this can be useful, and we can get into that. Legacy is export the project. For people that are not running the latest versions of this, this will only work down to a certain point, and that if you read the text here, it'll go down to a 13.4 AgForm version. Anything below that, it won't work. So you have to have 13.4 or later. You can export the grid. the design grid to a text file. And there again, you got to have the design grid turned on. And you can export the cut fill grid and the auxiliary section. Also to a shape file, this would be where you would export the smooth contour lines for use in some other program. You may want to use it to go over marking rice levees. And then you can export this to a Google Earth file, a KML. Since we don't have a design, it will only export just these existing contours. If you had a design, it would export the contours, all the design contours, cut fill contours, these landmarks, and these break lines. It would not export the information about the design that you get with the header sheet. So that ends the first section of going through all these menus here. So I'll have another video on going through different aspects of using these.